Um, Thank you for everyone for being here and for all that you do to prevent youth violence in our schools. I'm excited for the panel that's going to be following my remarks, as it is so important that we work together to understand and prevent youth violence. I think any of us that work in schools are very much aware that we have seen an increase in some of the behavioral and the emotional concerns. For example, a study that has been done post pandemic found that actually 80% of teachers and staff that were surveyed have been on the receiving end of threats. 56% of the staff members have actually been on the receiving end of physical violence. And unfortunately, this is leading to up to 57% of teachers that are expressing a desire to resign. But in addition, it's also our students that are feeling unsafe. In regards to bullying, a study that was done capturing those incidences in 2021 and 2022 are finding upwards of at school, 28% of middle school students have been on the receiving end of bullying, with 15% in high school and 10% in elementary. In addition, cyberbullying is also an issue that many of us are facing in schools, with upwards of 37% of middle school students say that they have experienced cyberbullying, followed by 25% in high school and 6% in elementary. In addition, another area where we've actually seen a pretty significant concern is that in the 2022-2023 school year, over 1,100 guns were brought on schools. 58% of those that were confiscated have actually never been publicly reported. So there's many of us that are concerned that actually that number could be an underreport. But I think what's really concerning is when we look at some of the data from 2018 to 2023, there's been a 79% increase in guns on campus, with some of those guns actually brought by students as young as 4 years old. So there's no doubt that there's a variety of different types of safety concerns that we're dealing with in schools, but violence is clearly one of them. But at the same time, we don't want this all to be gloom and doom. What can we do? One of the most important things is that we need to really focus on staff wellness, because if a teacher's stress response system is dysregulated, then how can they expect their students to regulate their own? So really focusing on getting supports in there for our staff, better equipping them with the skills and knowledge to respond to some of the behavioral and the mental health needs that we are seeing within our students. In addition, I think for all of us, whether it is staff, whether it is students, emotions matter. Um, Emotional regulation is needed for attention, memory, learning, decision making, relationship, health, and well being, for good performance. So it's really helping our students and our staff with the better skills and really focusing on that climate and culture, which is not only teaching emotional regulation and how do we get along and how do we support each other, but we're also really focusing on that climate and culture where everybody feels accepted. And there's a documentary out there called Resilience, The Biology of Stress, the Science of Hope. It's actually one of my favorites that talks about trauma. And they have a quote in there that's one of my favorites that says, "The presence of a supportive relationship is more critical than the absence of ACEs, or adverse childhood experiences, in promoting well being." Now, what that quote really resonates with me is that while we can't always change the past, what we certainly can do is help to shape the future by really building these positive relationships and really teaching that emotions are okay. It's what you do with those emotions that sometimes can get you in trouble. So, one of the things that you're going to hear the panel speak about is that we need this comprehensive approach to school safety. And we need this comprehensive approach to really tackling the concerns around violence. We need to make sure that we have a good balance between physical and psychological safety initiatives. We do not want our schools to feel like fortresses, but we do need to have good physical security measures. But at the same time, we need to really focus on that climate and culture and building those relationships. We want to make sure that we have good culturally responsive practices where everybody feels like they belong. We want to make sure too that we are better equipping our teachers and our students with those social emotional learning skills, the self-awareness, the self-management, responsible decision-making, relationship skills, social awareness, quite honestly, those skills that just make us really good human beings and good community members and neighbors. Also, trauma-informed practices can really help our educators set a school climate and culture that takes trauma experiences into consideration, but we also mitigate those trauma activators that could end up leading to emotional dysregulation and really better equipping our students with the abilities to manage those emotions. Conflict resolution, de-escalation strategies, I would argue for students and for staff are really critically important, but then also having a really good behavioral threat assessment and management process in place. So when we notice concerns around targeted violence, we have a multidisciplinary, collaborative problem-solving approach to really getting those individuals help. Kicking them out of school is not the answer. That does not keep us more safe. Also, that attention to staff and student wellness, those restorative practices, good parent-teacher collaboration, engaging our student voices, and really utilizing them to work with their own peers about being a good upstander, not a bystander that just watches, but when we see something of concern, we see someone struggling, we report and we get them help. And making sure that we have good confidential reporting mechanisms in place that students trust. So another one of my favorite quotes comes from Margaret Wheatley, and it says, it is possible to prepare for the future without knowing what it will be. But the primary way to prepare for the unknown is to attend to the quality of our relationships, to how well we know and trust one another. So while I know sometimes the challenges seem pretty daunting, at the same time, we can't always predict what the future is going to be. But what Margaret Wheatley really emphasized to us is, how do we prepare for the unknown? It really is about the quality of those relationships. So as I like to say, our number one prevention and mitigation tool to violence is really all about connectedness and relationships. So the panel that you're going to hear from has some fabulous strategies that we can utilize in schools to really empower our students and staff to really support each other and to create a climate and culture where nobody wants to harm each other, but what they really want to do is focus on getting help for each other. Thanks again for everything you do, and have a great conference.